de fábrica, acho que é gut.
Hi, Andy.
Oh, hello. That seems to have got it.
Great. Good, right on time.
Excellent. How are you both doing today?
Hey, Andy, great to see you.
It's
Yeah,
great.
lovely to see you too.
Whenever there's sunshine outside, it's sunshine in our hearts as well. Yeah, but you're so aware of that, you know.
Yes, I mean it's
conversation in the UK. So.
the UK is usually such a kind of grey winter, but today at the moment it's beautiful sunshine and blue sky. So yeah, I had a little bit of a walk around the block before this session just to wake myself up, and it's lovely being outside on a sunny day.
It's perfect. Yeah, same here, same in Romania. So it's absolutely fantastic to have you joining us. The session is being recorded. We'll dedicate, and as soon as I'm letting people in, you'll get to meet all of the teams that are in the program. We've got 42 teams in Spotlight. I don't think all 42 will be joining, but they're pretty much aware of the fact that you're here with us tonight. So I'm sure that they've got questions for you. So as you know, there's no formal presentation or anything going on. It's just your experience brought in front of them for the next hour or so. We'll do this quick round of introductions. As soon as everybody's, or at least the folks that are in right now at the beginning, as soon as they're in the call, we'll start. But we'll dedicate the first minutes for introductions, and then just to warm up the scene, we'll have a bit of a chat to do exactly that, to warm up the scene. But the floor will be theirs for the next hour, and I'm sure that the conversations will be at least bubbly, and hopefully you'll get to hear some questions that, who knows, you haven't heard.
Let us sing.
Let's see if this is the call. So hey guys, I'm letting people in. Hi.
Hey.
Hey.
Hi, hello.
Great. So I think hello, hi. Just to go around the what's happening today. You already had one Q&A session, so this one's dedicated to the teams, but of course to sum it up for Andy as well. So we'll do a couple of minutes on introducing Andy, and then we'll jump up to a couple of questions, warming up questions. But then, as you've seen in the previous session, it's your turn, and make sure that you bring everything that's burning right now and put it in front of Andy. And then we'll have, at the end of the session, we'll have some time to spend with Andy without the questions that, without the interaction with you. So we'll have that last bit as a sort of an interview. You're free to stay, so the teams are free to stay, but the ask is that we keep the conversation with Andy at the end. Great. So again, thank you so much for joining us. Andy has more than 20 years of experience in this field. So I absolutely feel that it's ridiculous of me to be doing a better introduction than yourself. But as you know, he founded Clearleft. He's one of the well-known names and speakers at conferences, so it's pretty easy to find him on YouTube and to re-listen to the speeches and to the presentation that he's delivered. He founded and curated Deconstruct, UX London, to name a few, and the super great community of more than 1,500 design leaders, and a founding member of Adobe Design Circle. So just to name a couple of things, recently, even though the experience I know has been more than just this year, but recently joined officially Seedcamp as an EIR. So maybe you can tell us a bit more about that experience as well and the interaction with the team, since Spotlight is a program that brings together teams that are pretty much at the seed stage, so pretty much at the stage that Seedcamp invests in. So in terms of resonating with the pain points and experiences that you've seen with the teams at Seedcamp, and other startups that you've coached throughout the year. So I'll let you do, anything else you'd like to add about yourself. It would be fantastic to hear it straight from you. And then to hear what are your expectations of the sessions, or what are, the maybe one or two questions that you'd like to address the teams right at the beginning. If not, we'll just jump straight to some questions. Thanks, Sandy, again.
Brilliant. Oh, well, thank you so much for a warm introduction. Quite often when you get introduced to these things, people sort of read word by word your bio, and it always sounds a little bit sort of like stilted. So it's really nice that you actually just kind of sort of riffed on a few things that I've done. Yeah, I mean, I've been around for ages, so I don't want to kind of, again, I don't want to sort of reel off a list of a bunch of things. But I guess my background is as a designer, a product person. I founded an agency called Clear Left, but ultimately I'm an operator, I'm an entrepreneur. So, I built a company of 30, 40 people. It's not, the size of 200 or 2,000 people that you're heading for. But I guess my experience of building a 30 and running a 30, 40 person company means that I kind of understand a lot of the same challenges that early stage seed to sort of Series A kind of businesses find themselves in. You're growing, you're scaling, you're recruiting, you're putting brand new processes in place. At the same time, you're building up your competencies, your capabilities, you're selling, your marketing. These are all things that are really, really common to me. Because my agency, I ran a company for 15 years called Clear Left, which I recently sold. But because we were sort of the first UX agency in the UK or Europe, arguably, I've got a long history and heritage of kind of wanting to bring a more sort of scientific approach to design and product. So that's kind of where my head's at is, I'm a design at heart, I'm a UX person at heart, I'm an operator, but yeah, with an entrepreneurial kind of sort of spirit. When I started Clear Left in 2005, the UK really wasn't as much of a hub for startups as it is now. So a lot of our early work was very much either focused with US startups or more traditional businesses. So we've worked with, lots of kind of like big names that you would have heard of. But I always really like working with the smaller kind of up and coming companies. And so I got to know Seedcamp at their very, very first fund back, I think it was probably 2006 or 7 or something. You'll probably know better than me, 2008. And so I've sort of been to, all 10, 11 years of sort of Seedcamp's journey. I've known the founders, Carlos and Reshma for that long. And I've, over that process, I've mentored possibly hundreds of founders through the Seedcamp program. So when I sort of stepped away from my agency, beginning of the year, Carlos said, "Oh, why don't you come and join and use some of that entrepreneurial spirit, advisory spirit for our portfolio companies." So for the last 6 months, I guess I've been hopping on calls, 7, 8, 9 times a week with founders at various stages of their growth cycle, but mostly, pre-seed, seed up to Series A. And kind of just helping them with some of their problems. And the challenges that you get in this stage are often fairly predictable because you go through these predictable growth phases. But I've really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed helping founders. And so when I got the opportunity to come and chat to you wonderful people, I leapt at the chance. So here I am.
Thank you so much again. I think as I said, to warm up a bit the discussion. So I really like your quote, or how you're saying that design is happening in your organization, whether you like it or not, or whether you plan or whether you think about it or not, it's happening. So what do you mean by that? Why would you say design is something founders should look at? And how should they set the priority of acceleration mode for design, or pause, or so what's the best timing to take into consideration design for a startup?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the tricky problem around design is design actually means a lot of different things to a lot of people. I think a lot of people who maybe this is their first entrepreneurial career, when they think about design, they think about kind of delivery people. You know, you get your engineers to build the thing, you get your product managers to maybe solve the business problems, you hand it over to the designer and they open up in Figma and they make it look pretty. And yeah, there are designers that have a very shallow approach to design and are really stylists. But actually, if you look at the profession of design, if you talk to designers at Airbnb and Google and, you know, Lyft and all the big tech companies, they're not people that are just delivery people. They're not just shipping pretty interfaces. They're not just putting a wrapper or a skin on something. What they're doing is they're solving problems, and they're solving problems through a process which has become known as design thinking. So this sort of process involves understanding the problem, understanding the people that are experiencing this problem, and it might be the business, it might be your customers, having, you know, a route to asking a whole bunch of questions to kind of inform their decisions, and then
nu vine astăzi.
Oh, sorry, the lady on the phone, you might want to turn your microphone off.
Yeah, can you please? It's fine.
Okay. So yeah, so, you know, actually designers are more than just the interface. Designers are looking at the whole product as a whole. They're trying to understand what features need to go in there. They're trying to understand what problems the customers are trying to solve. They're trying to explore how other companies are solving those problems. They're trying to figure out the journey, getting people to buy the product, getting people to sign up, getting people to use the product, getting people to stay, getting people to come back. What this actually means is really designers are the ones who are largely responsible for product market fit. They're making all these decisions, or at least they're actively involved in all these decisions. If you don't have designers on your team, then those decisions are being made. And they might be being made by the CEO or the CTO or what have you. But they're not being made by people whose career has been focused purely around kind of solving those classes of problems. So having designers involved in the earlier stages of your business, I think makes a lot of sense, because if you don't have designers involved, those design decisions are being made, but they're just not being made in a structured way. They're not being made in an informed way. They're being made in a sort of slightly scattershot way. And what typically happens in my experience is that founders will often over-index engineering. They will spend ages building a product that they will release onto the market. That product then, because it hasn't been properly thought about or researched, doesn't get the growth that they expect. It doesn't get the traction they expect because they haven't reached product market fit. And so they'll go back to the drawing board and they'll rejig it and they'll change it and they'll try it again. And then they'll launch it again and then it doesn't quite work. And you might end up going through 3 or 4 or 5 iterations before you get that product market fit. Often they might start by hiring a junior designer to kind of put a sort of a gloss on top of the product. But again, if that designer isn't solving problems, then that isn't really going to help. It's only really when you start to get very senior experienced designers that can sort of take this design thinking approach to your product and really start building a product that kind of meets the needs of your customers and meets the needs of the market. But I see so many product companies that it takes too long for them to realize that they need this set of skills. And by the time they've realized they need these set of skills, they've often run out of runway. They've often, you know, used all their money. They've built 3 or 4 products or versions of product that don't work. And yeah, they hit the end of the runway. So my belief is that, you know, it makes sense to get designers in the door early, not just the stylists though, the problem solvers, the kind of the higher end product designers, interaction designers, UX designers. You know, I think it's actually, you know, I think a really, really powerful team is, you know, is to have a designer on your founding team, you know, along with the, you know, the CTO, along with the, you know, the CEO, head of marketing, what have you. And that can allow you to get to that product market fit much, much quicker. Now, some of this also depends on the market you're working in. Now, if you're working in a very, very tech-driven space, if there's a lot of middleware, if it's AI, if it's kind of like, you know, creating APIs, then maybe you don't need as slicker user experience and if you're working in a much more highly competitive space. But actually we're working in an environment now where people aren't just judging your product by other products that do the same thing. People are judging your product through everything they use. People are judging the quality of your product by the food order they made last night with Deliveroo, or the taxi ride they took with Uber or Lyft. And so design gives a really important sense of professionalism and trust to your product that you might not get if you just have an MVP, a rough beta. And so I think that's another important thing to kind of recognize, that design really can create a sense of professionalism, which is really important if you're only a team of 3 or 4 people. So I think there's lots of reasons why getting design early is important. The other problem is if you leave getting designers to a bit later in the stage, a lot of the key decisions have already been made, and it's really difficult to unpick those decisions. So yeah, taking a design thinking approach and bringing designers in who are trained to do this, I think is a very smart move.
Before, I've got so many questions myself, but before I continue, is there anyone from the teams who'd like to start with the questions?
And could we also have a follow-up question to yours, Iwan? I was just thinking of something, and thanks, Andy, for bringing this up. But just if the founders don't have yet a question, in my mind, as you were speaking, came to my mind the Olson's pyramid. I think that's PMF pyramid or something that says that at the top of your experience, your user's experience with your product comes the UX experience. So probably where the product and product design come in. What do you actually mean by the product design? Because probably you're not referring to that top layer of the product market fit pyramid that he's talking about, right? But bridging these two gaps between the market and the problem, and then how you actually address this with your solution.
I don't fully understand the question, but I'll try and interpret, because I think I sort of know what you're hinting at. I mean,
thanks.
You are building a product that you are hoping will deliver value to your customers. And actually, if your product delivers more value than what you're charging, your customers will buy it. And if it's delivering less value than what you're charging, they won't. So one of the first things you have to do is you have to convince your customers that the product that you have and you're giving them delivers more value. Now, if you are solving a problem that's never been solved before, people won't care how well designed the problem is, because they just want the problem to go away. Mm-hmm. So let's say you are the first company to do 15-minute grocery deliveries. And people desperately want 15-minute grocery deliveries. It's the most important thing in their life. They don't want to go out to the shop and get grocery deliveries. Then they really don't mind if it's a bit clunky, if it's a bit broken, if there's some bugs, as long as they can get that value. However, as soon as other people come onto the market, they start iterating. They start thinking about creating a really, really smooth logging process. They think about, a really smooth shipping process. So you make sure that you get the items that you want and they're delivered on time and you don't have to have refunds. If you have to do a refund, they create a really, really smooth customer experience process where you can get that food credited back to your account really, really quickly. All of the annoyances, all of the frustrations that you might have with a really, really simple, bare bones technical product, user experience can come and they can kind of shave off the corners. There's this idea, an economist called Joseph Pine has this idea of the experience economy. And this is the way he sort of explains it. He says, if you are just to sell a bag of coffee beans, the cost of the coffee that goes into a single sort of shot of coffee might be like 1 pence, 1 cent. If you go to a shop and have the coffee ground, buy ground coffee, it might be more expensive. You might be paying 5 or 10 cents for a coffee. If you go to an average coffee shop, like a cafe, and you ask them to make you cheap coffee, you might, spend £1. However, if you go and sit in a lovely coffee shop with great music and a great vibe and lovely chairs and what have you, and the coffee is, you know, made by a barista that knows what they're doing, you'll pay £3 or £4. What he talks about is this experience economy. People are willing to pay more for something that is a better experience because people derive value for that experience. Now, that's not saying you can't have a business model that is a commodity model. You know, there are plenty of airlines that you can get from, you know, the UK from London to Ireland for £20 or £15. But the experience is really, really painful. And what you're doing, you're saying, okay, I'm willing to pay a really, really cheap price to get a crappy experience. Or you could be a premium model. You could be someone like Virgin Atlantic, where you have a really comfortable seat, you have brilliant kind of changing, policy if you need to change your ticket. You go to the airport, you have a brilliant sort of, check-in process. And the experience, the overall experience to you is worth more. And if that experience to you is worth more, you can charge more. So there's this idea of this experience premium, like thinking through the problems, thinking through the challenges, taking the pain away allows you to charge more. And this is what designers do every single day. Designers create experiences. They create delightful experiences, experiences that are thought through and considered. A lot of the time, if you don't have designers involved, you tend to have an engineering mindset whereby the technical model, the database structure, the way your algorithms are organized, the way your back end is built around the efficiency of the engineers. It's not built around the needs and desires of the customer. And this is why for many, many years, B2B products were awful, because they were designed for the efficiency of the people building them, not for the people using them. And the fundamental shift that happened 20 years ago, was this idea of being user-centered, the idea of thinking about the efficiency and experience of the customers rather than the efficiency and experience of the company building the product. Now, that doesn't sound like it should be a big deal, but I still see companies today who optimize their output around making developers' lives easier or making the businesses' lives easier rather than making the customers' lives easier. Now, if you go and do an MBA, the first thing you'll learn as an MBA is the way you deliver products, the way you build value, is you identify a market that's being poorly served. You talk to those customers to understand what those customers need. Why is that market being poorly served? What would they prefer? You then build a better product or a better service that beats the competition, and then people will move from the competition to you and they'll pay you more money. This is basic business 101. And who are the people who are delivering that improvement? Is it the engineers? Probably not. Is it the analysts? Probably not. The thing that the customers interact with, the product that they interact with, is the interface. The interface is your product. All the other stuff behind it is just the pipes that sort of plug it together. Now, when I say that design decisions will be made in your organization, you just don't know them, there is an argument to say that every decision that affects the customer experience is a design decision. You deciding whether you're going to have a 5-step checking process or a 1-step checking process is going to affect that decision. And it might be you decide that you want a 5-step checking process because you want to capture people's names and addresses and emails and yada, 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 because you can sell it or you can remarket people. But all of those decisions put friction in the system that are much more likely to make your customers drop out. So a good designer will understand what that customer needs. They might suggest, well, we'll make a 1-step process now and we'll grab that information later as we go. Or they might sort of make a compromise and say, okay, well, as a business, you want these 5 steps, but we've done some testing and research and we know that you're going to lose 85% of your customers in this journey. What do we need to do to kind of make that better? So yeah, so these are all the day-to-day decisions that happen in your product. And when you build a product that your customers love and find value in and keep coming back to, that's when you found product market fit. And like I say, that is being delivered largely by the design team and the product team. And actually, again, this is the interesting thing, because I think for early stage startups, the CEO is often the product manager, because the CEO is the one with the big vision and they're the one that's kind of driving the decision making. They've got a picture in their head of what the product should be like. If you're lucky, that vision will be informed because that person is coming from that market. So let's say you worked in renting properties and you saw a bunch of frustrations with the rental market. So you decided to go out as a founder and build your perfect rental platform. In the early stages, because you're really, really close to that market, you'll probably be making really, really smart design decisions, at least, you know, on a high level, you know. But as you as a founder start then having to deal with recruiting and hiring and HR and fundraising, all these other things, your closeness to the product problem space starts drifting. And so then you want to have somebody that is going out and talking to your customers every day. That could be a designer, that could be a product person. In many early stage companies, the designer, the first designer for the first year or two, effectively starts to become the head of product. The CEO is still directing things, but that head of design or designer is going out and doing the research, is kind of helping make those decisions, validate those decisions, validate the decisions. One of the things I see weirdly with the rise of product management these days is I've spoken, you know, in the past, you know, few months to a lot of startups that don't have any design resource. What they're doing is they're getting their engineers to build a nice looking interface using existing UI kits. It's really tempting, you know, why hire a designer when you can hire another engineer? Well, first of all, I'd argue the reason you hire designers is because they're cheaper than engineers. You know, if I want to have a design that looks nice, rather than spending twice as much on an engineer that's going to do a shitty job with the next UI, you know, with a UI kit, get someone that has a basic understanding of design, has a basic understanding of front end, and it will be cheaper and they do a better job. I think that the whole focus around startups is hiring talent, hiring the best people you can find, getting to the best work possible. So why would you waste an engineer doing mediocre design work? You know, in the same way as like, why would you hire like a CFO to be doing like basic sort of, you know, receipt reconciliation? It's a waste of money. But secondly, well, where was I going with this sort of thread? So I think there's value in hiring designers sort of in the early stages. The UI kit thing is a problem because it has a veneer of design, but actually you're not solving sort of the fundamental problems. All you're doing is you're putting a glossy interface on a technical solution. That can last for so long, but eventually your customers start to ask for more. There's this whole idea, I'm sure a lot of your founders would have heard of it, crossing the chasm. This idea that sort of early customers of yours are probably going to be friends and friends of friends. They're probably going to be people that know you already, that are going to kick the tires and don't mind if it's rubbish. But there's a point when you start switching over to kind of getting product market fit, where people you've never spoken to before start coming in. People call this the late majority. These are not your early adopters. These are people that expect a higher level of experience. And designers are the ones that are going to deliver that, not your engineers. So again, I find this weird thing where a lot of founders get so used to hiring an engineer that hires another engineer, hires another engineer, hires another engineer. They have a very engineering driven company, which works for the early adopters. As soon as you try and commercialize your company, those more savvy customers who are expecting a better experience look at your product and go, well, this doesn't make any sense. You know, this is designed by an engineer, not designed by a designer. And because the CEO is so now divorced from the product space, because they love their product, they think it's perfect because every founder does, you know, founders are like parents. Everybody thinks that their kids are perfect and everybody else is awful. And actually, if you know what your kids are actually like at school, they're probably awful too, but you have these blinkered vision on. So having designers that can talk to customers, that can help you understand the weaknesses in your product, I think is a really, really sort of smart tactical advantage. And here's another thing. I was just going to sort of finish off my thread there. So, and then the other thing is, like, at the end of the day, design provides value to businesses. The McKinsey consultancy did a report recently where they kind of invested in, you know, a bunch of companies that they said they were design led, you know, the Apples and, you know, of the world. And the design led companies outperformed the market sort of a factor of 3 to 1. So this isn't just kind of a social good. This isn't just saying, oh, people love design. Design is a value driver. Design is competitive advantage. And, you know, this is why we have massive companies like Airbnb who, you know, like, you know, who have just set the stage for companies that are design driven. This is why, you know, one of the reasons Netflix have got a massively strong design team. Like, if you look at all of the companies that you idolize, often they were either founded by designers or they've had really, really strong design teams to push them to where they are now.
Thanks so much. I've seen Ilya had his hand up for a question. So I'm
Yeah.
not sure if Andy's already answered it or not. But if not, shoot away.
Yeah, well, kind of. I want to jump in a rabbit hole of this 15 minutes delivery, which is a great example, and argue a little bit and get your thoughts on how to protect yourself from copying. So if we take the example, there is a startup that creates an experience where people get groceries in let's say 10 minutes. And they solve this problem by providing a usable design which features allow people to consume this product in an easy way, in the way they expected to consume to get the grocery. And then the competition, better funded competition comes, and they can easily replicate the interface if that's the interface that brings value. Isn't it kind of difficult to protect yourself against that?
So this is an interesting thing. It's a really, really good question. I don't believe that it's as easy to replicate as you think. And I'll give you a classic example. About 7 or 8 years ago, I think it was somebody like Best Buy, big American kind of, electrical supplier, looked at Amazon and said, look, Amazon are best in class. Amazon have an engine that encourages, people to give reviews, people to provide feedback, people to give star ratings. Because of that, it drives so much commerce. We want to have some of that magic. So we want to basically buy the Amazon platform, rebrand it as Best Buy, and get all that magic. And so they did. They made a massive deal with Amazon, and basically Best Buy was empowered by Amazon. And nobody came to review products. Nobody came to give star ratings. Nobody came to do any of that stuff that happens on Amazon, even though it was exactly the same interface. Why? Because that's what you do on Amazon. You don't do that on Best Buy. So you can have an identical product, but if it's not being built into the DNA of your company and your customers, it will fail. And I see this all the time. There's this idea of this concept. Has any of you come across this idea of cargo culting? Does that ring a bell to anyone in the audience? Cargo cults are fascinating. So basically, I'll give a little explanation of cargo cults. Cargo cults emerged at the end of the Second World War, where previously a lot of rich Americans had been, soldiers, GIs, had been in the Pacific Islands, and they brought with them Levi jeans, and they brought with them kind of candy, and they brought with them kind of, Coca-Cola. And there was this massive kind of boom in the Pacific Islands. And when the war was over, the Americans went away. And the Pacific Islanders thought, okay, we want to get these things back. We want to get the jeans, we want to get the Coca-Cola. And so what they did is they cleared runway strips in the middle of the jungle, and they created things that looked like planes out of sticks and twigs and brushes. And they remembered that the soldiers marched up and down. So they thought, well, maybe there's some magic in this. So we'll march up and down, and we'll wear outfits that look a little like the soldiers, and we'll carve guns that look like the soldiers. And if we do the things that the soldiers did, these great bounties will fall down from the sky. But what happened is they didn't understand why the things did the thing they did. So copying blindly without understanding why is usually a recipe for disaster. One interface that works for one company doesn't necessarily work for another. So that's one thing to bear in mind. The other thing to bear in mind is that this idea of sustained competitive advantage is no longer sort of feasible. Back in the day, your parents or your grandparents' age, you would build a business, you would spend a ton of money on marketing that product, and then that product would just give you continuous competitive advantage moving forward. You build your Coca-Cola, and Coca-Cola now just keeps giving you competitive advantage. You don't have to do anything about it. And occasionally you create new Coke, and it doesn't work, and so you go back to Coca-Cola, and it keeps giving you this competitive advantage. In today's business world, the idea of sustained competitive advantage is now dead. If you build a product, your competitors will copy you in 6 months' time. So you've got two approaches. Either you outcompete your competitors because you're always 6 months ahead. You're always doing something new. You're always understanding what works. You're always optimizing. You're always tinkering. And once you've optimized and once you've tinkered and you've launched, a bunch of other people will follow. and they'll try and copy you, but they get it wrong. They do a poor job. They might even copy your interface 100%. You might be a rocket internet, like the German company, who literally copy interfaces really, really detailed. But your customers are slightly different. Your market's slightly different. What you're offering is slightly different. And so they're never going to be perfect. But also, by the time they've copied you, you've already jumped ahead 6 months, 9 months, or a year, because you've already been working on the stuff that's about to launch that for ages. So somebody asked me the other day, actually I got an email asking me why do people like Netflix end up paying billions of pounds for design? And the reason they pay billions of pounds for design is because they want to stay 6 months or a year ahead of their competition. They want to make it so difficult to copy that it's not even worth bothering. And when you do copy it, and there are tons, there are tons and tons and tons of streaming services out there, and all of them have they've not tried to copy it outright because they'd get sued, but they've tried to copy elements, but these elements all end up combining in subtly different ways, and they don't work quite as well as this brilliant machine that Netflix has created. And actually, to be honest, the other argument, which I think is a more convincing argument, is I think it's harder to copy design. It's really easy to copy engineering. It used to be in the olden days that engineering was a competitive advantage. You had to buy server farms, you had to spend years building things. Now, you boot up an instance on Amazon, EC2, you plug in a bunch of, APIs, your competitors can copy your tech stack literally in a matter of weeks. But understanding your market and understanding their market and building and designing and iterating and doing multivariate testing and optimizing, that stuff takes time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
I've seen Sandro with his hand up.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask the teams maybe to do that 20 seconds intro of what you do and in what market, because it might help Andy tailor the reply somehow to exactly to what you're doing. So Sandro.
Yeah, hi, Sandro, building language learning, future of mobile learning with languages. So my question, I'm a huge fan of Designer, I'm a CEO, and I'm like always on the design part, but there's one challenge that I'm finding, and it's that in education, you are kind of tackling this, I would call them the heavy MVPs, right? Is because when you are selling something, you're selling education. It's not like, get your groceries in 5 minutes or 5 seconds. And typically, the expectation on the product is to deliver a process that, takes a while. So in the industry, you either get on, what competitors do is, let's just create yet another vocabulary game, another flashcard game, or let's just build a tutoring app, right? Like it's both on the ends, but like there's no that. And do you have any kind of like heuristics to make decisions that will help you tackle the design of a heavy MVP, that it will not become a burden? Because that's something that I'm finding is like when I think that, the solution and design takes me like, I don't know, a very highly, incredibly complicated product that might, just ruin me. It would basically drag all my cash flow onto it.
I mean, again, it's a difficult one to kind of address directly. Ultimately, you've got to decide whether you want to provide something that is better than your competitors. And you've got to decide what better is. Better could be faster, better could be cheaper, better could be more connected, or better could be a service that the customers that use the product like and want. There are plenty of language learning tools out there that are direct to customer, and the ones that typically are, favored, your Duolingos, for instance, they are brilliantly designed. They're brilliant pieces of product design. They've got brand, they've got character, they've got really deep thinking about kind of, how the learning journey is designed. It's not just we're going to throw up a bunch of crappy flash games. It's like, how can we make sure that these customers come back and they repeat and they learn and they progress, and how can we demonstrate that progress through progression bars? How can we offer them 5 or 6 or 7 different routes into learning, because maybe their brain works slightly differently? So, you know, these are brilliantly designed tools. They are engines that drive engagement, and because of that, customers keep coming back. Now, if you are selling a B2B product, that becomes a little bit more difficult, because often the people who are using the product aren't the people who are paying for the product. So it might be that you're selling into schools, but it's the kids or the learners in the schools who are using the product. That becomes a much harder sell. Because what typically happens when people who are buying a tool who aren't using the tool is they end up doing feature shopping. So they go, okay, well, look, I've been told that I need to buy this tool. I'm going to find a tool that has all these features, but is cheaper. If you are in that market, if you're trying to sell cheaper, then it becomes a race to the bottom, because what happens is someone else will come and provide it even cheaper and even cheaper and even cheaper. And so what ends up happening is, it's just a massive race to the bottom. My experience, though, is that those companies will buy these old-fashioned B2B tools. There's lots of tools in the education market space that are designed for lecturers to set tasks, for students to see what tasks they have, etc., etc., etc. These tools are universally hated. They're old-fashioned. They're like being forced to use Microsoft Teams when everyone else is using Slack. And at some point, and maybe not now, maybe 3 or 4 years' time, the company will get that buying this tool will get so many criticisms that they will let that tool go, and they will buy something else. And when they buy something else, they buy something modern and sexy and well designed, because that's the demand and the pressure they've been getting from their customers. I've worked on tons and tons of B2B products where we've shown our customers that this model happens. That, it's all very well pitching towards the person who's buying the product and doing the feature comparisons, but for the next 3 or 4 years, they'll get a whole load of stick from the people who are using the product because it doesn't work in the way they want. It's frustrating, it's messy, etc., etc. I also think it's really interesting that I think we have an idea around the education space. It's understandable. It's kind of old-fashioned, I've got a couple of friends of mine that run a tool that is designed for schools, and their job was to unseat an existing incumbent design, a product that was just an engineering solution. And the only way to do that was to be an engineering solution that teachers loved, that students loved, that would get used. And that's their strategy. So, yes, it's expensive. It takes time and money to be good. You as a founder has to decide whether my strategy is to be good, is to be better than competition. Yeah. Or to form some other strategy. And it might be, there are perfectly reasonable strategies out there. You could spend a ton of money on sales. You could sell a shitty product with brilliant salespeople, and you close that deal, and 3 years later they churn, and you made a ton of money, and you sell that shitty product to somebody else. I mean, frankly, this is how Microsoft Teams works. This is how most enterprise software works. Shitty products, and what happens is the salespeople get a ton of money. They wine and dine people. The people that buy the product who never have to use it get flown out to Miami to come to the conference and this and that and the other, and so that's a perfectly good strategy. It's not the strategy that I want, and I would argue it's not the strategy that's driving the current growth in technical products. Nobody at the moment, I think, in the startup world is saying, hey, I want to be Microsoft Teams. Everyone is saying, hey, I want to be what the next version of Slack's going to be like.
Very, very, very nice answer. Thank you very much for the detailed answer.
Great. Thanks, Sandro. I've seen Irina raising her hand.
Hello. So I'm Irina. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Vaunt. Vaunt is a SaaS software solution dedicated to residential real estate developers and real estate agencies that helps them streamline sales and management for residential projects. My question for you, since we're battling basically an industry that's not very digitized at this point, we already have a product and 400 users. When you want to do design changes, let's say in the mobile app, how do you how do you do them so that you don't freak out the end user? Because we already rewrote their patterns and taught them to act in a specific way.
It's a really great question. I think, and here's, I've got a couple of answers to this. So first off, I think a lot of the time when people have to do redesigns and big redesigns, it's often because they hadn't thought hard enough about the problem in the first place.
Yeah.
You know, you hire a bunch of engineers, they solve the problem, suddenly you've got tens of thousands of customers, and then those customers start moaning or complaining, or you start seeing the problems and things aren't efficient, and then you have to go back and repair the problems that could have been solved earlier. So this is not aimed at you, and this might not be irrelevant, but the earlier you can get designers in to prevent those problems coming up in the future, the less the less technical and design debt will be baked into the system, and the cheaper it will be. And actually, a lot of teams, they move incredibly fast at the start, but they end up having to pay that and pay off their debt later on. And sometimes that's inevitable. But sometimes just with hiring one or two people, I mean, again, one of the great things about designers is you don't need too many of them, and they're pretty damn cheap. You know, typically you want one designer for every 5 engineers. So for every 5th engineer you hire a designer. Those designers will make those engineers more efficient. They will help solve some of these technical debt problems. There's lots of research that shows that for every problem that you could have solved before the product launches, it will cost you 10 times as much afterwards. So you end up having all these problems that you accumulate that you know about. You know, I do this all the time. I go and speak to customer services reps. And the customer services people will say, hey, look, we've got a team of 100 people. We get the same 10 calls every single day. Yeah. This is broken, this is broken, this is broken. And we keep telling the product people that they need to fix this, but they don't. And so all that happens is we sort of stick a Band-Aid over it by not fixing the product, and by having to have more and more money spent on customer experience. So one argument for doing that is if you get it right the first time, or if you fix it later on, you bring the cost of servicing down. And actually, fundamentally, if you want to be a successful company, there's only really a couple of things you need to do. You need to improve acquisition, you need to improve retention, you need to reduce your cost of service, and you need to kind of improve the customer sentiment. If you get those right, you've got a really good product. If you've launched a product and there are problems, like the first thing is, if you are constantly making changes from the start, and if you're doing a really, really good sort of agile process, your customers are constantly seeing changes and improvements happening all the time.
This is what we're doing right now. This is what we're doing right now. But we also don't want to freak them out with the changes, because we've seen some things they can do more efficiently in the app. So that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, so I was getting there. It was a long journey. I do apologize, but I was sort of getting there because what happens is a lot of people, they don't make those changes regularly, and then they make a big bang change, and that big bang change features everybody out. Whereas if the company is used to making changes, if you're communicating those changes, you've got a really good product manager, that product manager is emailing people every couple of weeks saying, hey, this is on our roadmap, etc., etc. People are engaged with the journey.
Okay.
In terms of when you roll out and how you roll out new features, I think the first thing to do is, as much as possible, try not to deviate too much from the current system. If you're using a product every single day, and you're pushing out a massive change, what it's like is like coming home from a busy day at work, and you just want to cook dinner, and somebody's moved your kitchen to a different floor, and you're like, I can't deal with this. I just need to cook food, and it's really frustrating. So I get that. But the first step is to tell people that this is happening, so they're prepared. Oh, we're working on your kitchen. It's going to be a little bit weird over the next couple of days. Just be aware. Secondly, don't do it in one big go. Do it over a small process. So feature flags, start bringing a small number of people onto the new platform, onto the new features, people that have been with you for a long time and are willing to change, or new cohorts. The other thing to do is to do cohort changes. So basically, don't worry about the people who have been using the product for 3 years, but for the new people who join, roll that feature out. or take 10% of your traffic and roll that new feature out. And what this does, it just gives you time to validate, to get the teething problem solved. Because what you don't want to do is you want to launch a new feature and then have to roll back because it doesn't work. Because it's bad enough messing things around once. If you have to mess things around again, it's a real pain. So again, cohort-based, feature flag-based, small percentage of your customers.
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing a major change, you know, a lot of people will go from a version 1 to a version 2, have both of those versions running at the same time, have a little banner at the top that says, hey, do you want to check out our new look? You know, and it could be the whole system. It could just be like the dashboard, you know, say, hey, look, you know, you can keep your classic dashboard now, but a little banner at the top says, check out the new version 2 dashboard. That means that if people have got a really, really important deadline to meet, they can just stick with the old version. If they're curious, they can sort of flip over to the new version and have a bit of a play. And let people know, you know, we're going to be making this new version live in 60 or 70 days or whatever it is. And at some stage, once you've told people you're flipping over, flip things around so people can still use the old version, but now that thing has been deprecated. People come to their new version, but they can still use the old version if they need to. And then eventually you move the old version out, and people are just comfortable with the new version. The other thing I would say is we get often so nervous about making changes that we never make changes. And a lot of the people who will complain about the changes are your strongest advocates. And that can be really, really difficult. If somebody is really important, you know, you've got a chain of 100 estate agents and their boss rings your boss up and says, why have you done this? You've really, really messed things up. You know, you can be really, really nervous. You have to be confident that the changes you're making are going to be better for the customer in the long term. Sometimes you've just got to make those changes and deal with people being upset. In my experience, what happens is people will complain and moan and bitch and put bad reviews on for a couple of weeks. And then they'll get into the habit of using the new tools. And then, you know, you'll ask them, you know, in 3 months' time or 6 months' time, what they think about the new service. And they won't even remember it's a new service. They'd have completely forgotten about the old thing that a couple of months ago they were so angry about, because people don't like change. And so sometimes you just got to suck it up, and you've got to accept that, you know, when you're pushing out a major release, you will get negative feedback, and you need to brace your leadership team from the fact that they're going to have 2 months worth of crappy feedback. But you've done the testing, you've done the research, you've done usability testing, you've done sentiment analysis, you've done cohort analysis. You know that this is a better product, and you just need to steady the course, get over the next couple of months, and everyone will be fine.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
I was just thinking of a very weird thing, but I don't know who of you will resonate with children's analogy. But for example, for my little one, I was so stressed up when we moved houses, and I was way more stressed out than she was. She got the change and everything quite smoothly, but the idea that I wanted to say was, I think if you're confident in the change, if you're confident of what you're changing, and if you give them a heads up, similar to me giving a heads up to the little one, hey, we're changing houses, this is going to be a completely new life. I think if you're confident with that change, if you're relaxed, customers will feel your good energy, the same as a child feels your good energy somehow. And they'll just go along with what you're doing because they trust you to the level of, this is your recommendation, this is mom's recommendation, and in your case, you know, this is the product we've been using. If they recommend that, we'll go along. So sorry, just that popped into my head.
just one final thought on that question around about change as well, is like sometimes you can change things slowly. So there was a classic story, this is maybe going back 10 years, of eBay. Like eBay, the design was terrible. They wanted to make a change. And one of the first things they wanted to do was a really small thing. They just wanted to change an icon. And I think they wanted to change the color of the icon. And they changed the color of the icon. And then the whole of the eBay user base was up in arms. This is terrible. What are you doing? They changed it back immediately. And then over the next month or two, they slowly changed the color every day for over 60 days. And nobody noticed. And in 60 days time, it was the new design. And everyone was like, yeah, this is fine. So sometimes, you know, it's that sticker shock of change that happens. And so you can do things, you can slowly change things. A while ago, many years ago, we actually redesigned a product that was owned by eBay. It was a really, really ugly site. And we knew that there would be, you know, taking them to this new site would be so jarring. So we deliberately made a site that was slightly less ugly. You know, it was still ugly, it was still awful, it was something we hated, but it was an intermediary step in taking the customer's comfort zone to this new place. And, you know, and then you could slowly change things over time and they start to see this emerge. And again, a lot of it becomes PR, right. The other thing I think is about making it really desirable. Like, you know, if you've got a cohort of people that are using the new service and they're finding it really useful, and you've decided like this new service actually cuts off like, you know, 30 minutes of your day of a estate agent's time. And you have somebody from a big estate agent say this on your homepage. Hey, I'm really excited about, you know, launching the new version because it saved me half an hour a day. Suddenly everyone starts going, oh, this sounds like a really good thing. I want to save half an hour a day as well. So PR and marketing messaging around the changes can be really important as well.
That's great. Thanks, Andy. Rafal, you've got a question.
Yeah, according to the things about designing UX, designing graphic UX. So I won't introduce myself because I probably don't know what I'm doing. So we are doing solo workout system. Is such a cloud-based data collection system consisting of sensors and applications. So we designed sensors that we can attach to sports equipment in the gym, and the sensors are giving the information about all statistics that you make by workouting. So our application can go manually without the sensors, but this is great when it goes together with the sensors. Everything is automatically, and then when you add trainers application to the system, you can have a really remote workout done with your trainer. So and the data then is reliable because it goes from the sensors, so it's reliable data. Coming back to this, we just started accessing the market. 3 months ago, we are now on 4 gyms, and we're working with about 400 users or something like that. And there is a problem always between our behavior and that what the investors want from us, because we now want to stop and make the design UX to make it better. We just make another place for personal settings in the application. Yeah. So we don't want to scare the users. So we want to work only on this small group half a year, and the investors don't I don't know, believe in us. They just say, push it to the market, push it to the market, more users, more gyms. And I don't think that it is right way, but I have to listen to them because I need for for everything, for the UX design.
Yeah. I mean, I at the moment, as we sort of said at the start, I'm sort of working with an investment company. Every different investment company has a different thesis. They basically say, like, we invest in these kind of companies. These are the things that we value. So, choosing an investment company that values design over engineering, over speed can be important. Once you've already got your first round of investors, it might be that when you're looking to get your next round, you target people that have got a different set of values or beliefs. Because if you're finding that your values are not in alignment with the investors' values, there's always going to be tension. And if you're only ever doing what your investors tell you to do, then you're not really running the company, they're running the company. Now I would argue, sorry, you were going to say?
But you are talking from this point of view as it was before COVID, that I could choose investors. Now it's not the time. So
I just wrote it down. But
I deal with sports. So now every investor is afraid of. So it's really hard to speak with investors now. Before the COVID times, I could choose. Now, no, I'm asking them to invest in me. Yeah,
it's difficult. I mean, like I say, it's getting investors is like a marriage. And what I'm hearing from you is that you've married somebody that doesn't necessarily share your values, and you need someone to be married to. So you can't have a divorce and find somebody else to be married to. You've just got to live with it. That is a challenging situation, and if that's the situation, then you have to learn how to negotiate with that party, which is sort of the question you're asking. I guess I was just doing a little bit of a step back and saying that in the future, if you find yourself in a situation where you think this might be problematic, and you can pick other investors. I mean, the interesting thing is in London, I mean, again, it's really difficult. I don't know the other kind of geographical markets. In London, it's such a hot market for investment at the moment that if your company looks really exciting, you will have lots and lots of investors trying to kind of get you on board. And actually the VCs are really, really competing at the moment, and they're competing over who is providing the best value, who's providing the best fit. If that's not where you are in your geography, that's always a shame. But I do think there is value in having conversations, when it comes around to raising your next fund with as many people as possible. And if you have to go with the same group of people, then that's fine. How do you convince them then? Well, to some extent, I get your investors' sort of thought process, because as an investor, what that investor is trying to do is they're trying to build you into $1 billion business. They're trying to get you probably from 1 million ARR to 10 million to 100 million, because that's how they get their money back. They're not going to get their money back if you're doing 50 million a year, or 5 million a year rather. They're going to get their money back if you're doing 100 million a year. And so most investors really, really over-indexing growth, particularly if you are coming to like a next raise. Because what happens is investors want to see traction. They want to see that growth. They want to be sure that you're on that path. And so if you're kind of, 6 months away from running out of money, I can totally understand why they might want to be pushing for that growth. So I think the first thing to do is to have that conversation with them to understand why that growth is important. Is it because you're trying to hit a milestone or something? I think it's also worth reminding them, though, that if they do want you to be $1 billion business, look at the $1 billion businesses in this space. Look at Strava. Look at the kind of the Apple Watches. Are these companies that have invested in design? Are these companies that have won because of design? I'd say the mediocre kind of innocent sort of health type. So get them to look at like what it means to be $1 billion business and say, this is the journey we need to go to. However, I think the reality is you need to have a bit of both. I think if someone was to come to me and say, we need to stop everything we're doing, we need to stop all the growth and we need to reboot, that is kind of scary. I've got to be certain, 100% certain, that when you reboot, you're going to be able to capture that ground that you lost. I don't think these things necessarily always need a reboot, and actually I think you can sort of do a bit of horse trading, So if you need to spend, if you need to spend a little bit less time shipping new features because you need to put your engineering team, your design team on solving some of these technical problems, you can do. And just explain to them that like it will be cheaper to solve these problems now than in a year or two's time. In a year or two's time, it will cost you 2 or 3 times as much. So I would rather spend your money economically now than waste a bunch of money in the future. But in the meantime, if growth is really important to you, we might ramp down the launch of new features, but let's ramp this up. Let's spend a bit more money on marketing. Let's spend a bit more money on growth design. Let's look at what we can do to kind of improve the onboarding process. Let's look at what we can do to optimize the funnel. If we can we get your permission that if we hit these figures in the next couple of months, we can divert some of our resources to X. And actually, to be honest, like it's very rare that you need to get permission from your investors to do that. I think often it's just a case of making them feel comfortable. We need to stop. We need to do a quarter or even just like, again, that's the other thing, like don't stop work on the product for 6 months to solve these problems. Maybe just kind of balance things out. I've seen a lot of companies that have built up technical debt or design debt, and we'll go, okay, well, let's do 2 sprints shipping new product, 1 sprint fixing debt, 2 shipping product, 1 fixing debt, 2 shipping product, 1 fixing debt.
We are doing actually like this way because we are doing some small steps. So we released our basic application, and now we just make some changes in, and we just releasing next things for our users and just making it better. So we just doing step by step and looking to install in other locations.
Yeah. I think the other thing, particularly when it's an app-based thing, App Store reviews are really important, and App Store reviews are often driven by customer experience. So like, if you've got really high App Store reviews, maybe it's not a problem. If you're seeing the App Store reviews drop, and you can chart that out, you can go back to your investors and say, hey, look, I think we've got a problem. Things that, growth is going well, but our reviews are dropping down. And we think that like we're at 4-star at the moment. If we drop to 3-star, it's going to be problematic. And we think we're going to drop to 3-star in 6 months' time. In order to maintain our App Store reviews, we need to do X, Y, Z. We need to stem this flow. And if you put it in that way, people might go, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. People are so focused on growth. And this is the other thing, like, growth is only one part of the equation. It's the part that people fixate on, often a little bit too much. What you also want to look at is as well as kind of the review stuff, you want to look at attrition. So how many people are leaving your product? Because ultimately, it doesn't matter if you're growing at a massive rate if 95% of your customers don't come back. So again, like focusing on growth can be a bit of like an ego metric. Actually what you kind of want to do is you want to look at overall monthly active users, and you want to look at the sentiment of those users. And if you've got increasing active users and that sentiment is rising, really doesn't matter what the growth is. If you've got massive growth but your active monthly users are going down and the sentiment's going down, then this is a problem you need to prioritize.
Thank you.
We've got at least 4 more questions. So Alex was next. And
Thank you.
Yeah, we've got 3 more at least. So
I'll be quick. I'll try to make this quick. Okay. So we are building. First of all, my name is Alexandru. Thank you so much for the insights. We are building a consumer product around habit development, especially for leisure time activities. Right. So one of the problems that we've discovered is that people that, for example, they want to learn to play an instrument off the web, if you can believe there are those kind of people around us that learn a lot of things off the web, like for their leisure time. They do a lot of trial and error in selecting the right content and the right equipment, like the instrument and so on. And at the end, they pull it off. Some of them, they pull it off, the ones that have the motivation to push through. Now, some others, they quit because they simply cannot use that content or the learning material, and they stop somewhere along the way. And some of them, they try to push and they get frustrated because the materials are not the best, right? The ones that they have selected. So they need to look for different materials. Now, one could argue that this is not a major problem because as long as people can, get away with it. I mean, they can use YouTube or whatnot, TikTok, Skillshare, whatever is there. Then it's not a major problem. It's not like it's raining and they don't have an umbrella, right? So what would be your thoughts in designing a solution for this problem while knowing that it's not major, let's say, on a first sight, versus while looking at the attractiveness of the solution, right? Because I think that if the experience level is, let's say, good enough, and the solution will be attractive enough, then it would tone down the argument that it's not a major problem, right? Because people will be more and more attracted to the design solution, and then they would pick it up and simply use it. Yeah, okay. I try to be short.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I guess it depends what you mean by not a major problem. Ultimately, whenever you're deciding where to invest your time or your money or to build features, you kind of need to have a hypothesis. And that hypothesis is usually, we think that users are doing X or are finding this a problem. This is affecting this growth metric, this revenue metric, etc. So we are going to attempt to solve this. And, typically what you might do is you might start by having a better understanding of the problem. So my idea would be to have a hypothesis, what's going on, what you think is going on, how it's affecting the business. And obviously, if you're judging to do 3 or 4 things, you want to pick something that is either, a major problem or is a simple problem that you can fix quickly. Picking something that's not a problem and is going to be really expensive and time consuming to fix is a waste of money. Picking something which you think is a problem and is really cheap to fix, that's a sensible approach. So first of all, you've got to decide where you put your money. But let's say you decide that this is a thing that you think is going to have long-term effects, because ultimately you want to build this sort of viral coefficient in your business. You want every customer to come through, to finish their course, to be really, really into learning an instrument, so much so that they recommend another friend. If you can get a system where every customer, introduces you 1.5 customers, then you've got this brilliant viral growth. And so what can you do to make sure that as many customers as possible stay the course and recommend you? And then what you do is you go out and you do research and you talk to not just your customers, but you talk to people who are learning to play music. You talk to people who are learning to play music through the old-fashioned way of going to a place with a lecturer and find out what they like about the experience, what they don't like about the experience, what the frustrations are. Go and talk to people who are learning just on their own self-paced courses through free videos on YouTube. Also, go and look at how people are learning in other spaces, because learning an instrument is very similar to learning a language. So go and look at what Duolingo are doing. Yeah. And do a bit of research, do a bit of a competitive analysis, figure out how other people in this space have solved that problem, and then come back and come up with a design hypothesis. We think if we redesign our system this way, if we change this flow, if we put these incentives in, if we send these emails at this particular time, if we use AI to spot when people might be, leaving, whatever the proposal is, you put it in, you deliver it, you check to see whether it's had that effect, and either it has a good effect, it has null effect, or it has, it makes things worse. If it makes things worse, you rip it out. If it makes things better, you put it in and you try and iterate. If it does nothing, then you go back to your hypothesis and say, okay, well, maybe our hypothesis was wrong, maybe our research was wrong. At the end of the day, I mean, product management, product delivery is just this sort of people talk about the product kata. It's just this sort of cyclic approach of having a hypothesis, testing the hypothesis, coming up with a solution, iterating, and you just iterate over time.
Okay, super. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. So we've got Lucia, Dominik, and Piotr. We'll start with Lucia, please.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much, Andy, for these really insightful words. I'm from Miles, and we are an urban mobility startup, and we're building a solution that interconnects public transportation in a very busy city centers with taxi services on the last mile. So in the areas where the public transport is not so frequent with a lower transport serviceability. So this makes the commute much more comfortable and easier. And what we are doing, or what I actually want to ask, and I bet this is a situation of many startups around here, is that we need to push the product and have it on the market as soon as possible, namely the app for ordering the commute and subscribe for it and so on. And we have a designer and we work with the designer, but still it's a very first product. So when we are doing some very basic user testing, we see that there is still so many pain points and barriers for users, like they don't understand the service and like many very common issues. And my question is how to strike the balance between making the product very usable at the very beginning and still be on time, and also how to tackle this internally, because it's really tough in a large team or in a team of more people that have a different priorities and different views, how to tackle design as a priority, how to communicate it, and how to also push it into practice within some reasonable time frame, I would say.
I mean, again, you're right. It is a sort of an eternal question, and there's no, you know, with any of these things that have been asked, there's no. I think everybody is wanting kind of to be told what the perfect silver bullet is, and there's no silver bullet. We have to make decisions. We have to make trade-offs all the time. I think the first thing to do is to actually understand what your business needs to do now. You know, does your business just need to launch and prove its technology stack in order to raise more funding? If that's all it's doing, and it's only going to release it to 500 people, and if they prove the technology stack works, they'll get another 10 million, you know, pounds, then maybe you don't need to worry about whether it's particularly easy to use. On the other hand, maybe what you're trying to do is you're maybe trying to prove to the city that this is actually something that people want to use. And then you need to go back to them, you need to say, hey, look, we're doing this 6-month trial, and you know, we need to deliver 10,000 rides. And if you need to deliver 10,000 rides, then you've got to figure out as a team, what is the thing that we need to do to deliver that 10,000 rides? And if we just launch a very, very basic MVP, is that going to deliver 10,000 rides? If we launch the perfect product, but we launch it 6 months late, is that going to deliver 10,000 rides? And the reality is you probably need to find some compromise between the two. You know, you need to, you know, just as a developer would go through and prioritize all the bugs, you know, a designer probably needs to go through and prioritize the usability problems. And you just need to commit that, you know, we need to deliver this output, or we need to deliver at this time, and we are going to be willing to have this compromise, and we're going to be constantly iterating. And, you know, every team will have a different opinion. No opinion is necessarily right or wrong, but the irony is if you make the wrong decision, that could be the thing that kills your business. You know, and each market, each problem will have a different combination of answers. You know, what you don't want to do, I would argue, is launch a product that gets, you know, really, really crappy reviews. Going back to the one about the App Store, you know, you could, if you launch a ride, you know, hailing kind of last mile service, and it sits on the App Store at 1.5 stars, no one's going to use it. If you launch an app and it's frustrating and things are broken, no one's going to use it. So, you know, you've got to decide what your quality bar, your threshold is. And that's a decision only you and your team can make. The problem is that designers want everything to be perfect, and they're generally pretty bad at sizing problems. Product managers and execs want to get things out the door super fast, and then improve and iterate as you go. So actually, a lot of this also depends on your speed. You know, if you can get something out the door quickly, and you are confident that 2 weeks later you can push another release, and 2 weeks later you can push another release, and 2 weeks later you can push another release, and you can iterate in public, so that really, really quickly you can provide a brilliant product, then you can kind of get over some of those early teething problems. And actually, you know, if your first users are only 100 users and they give you a 1-star rating, but then you iterate and your next 500 users give you a 3-star rating, and you iterate, the next 10,000 users give a 5-star rating, everyone will forget the terrible experience of the early product. And a lot of early products are really crappy. So yeah, you've got to decide on your growth journey. You've got to decide what you're trying to achieve. You've got to think about this logically, you know, kind of, but yeah, you know, it's always a balance. And, you know, one of the reasons we moved to Agile is because we've seen so many businesses that try and spend a year and a half making the perfect thing. And when they launch it, somebody else has beat them to the market. So you kind of don't want to be too slow, but at the same time, you don't want to release something that's crap. So you've got to figure out a middle ground.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andy. I can see Dominic.
Yes, hi, hello. My name is Dominic. I'm a co-founder of Teamshark. It's a cohort-based courses platform for software-based trainings. So my question is whether design or technology should come first, because you mentioned a lot the design of Netflix and how great it is, but I think that Netflix just does the job, and because, for example, a lot of my friends drop out from HBO Go because not because of the poor design or the content itself, but because of the technology. It doesn't work well for them. So when we are building, for example, we are building something that should, in our reference, it should rebuild the public cloud in general. So without the technology, the design doesn't matter, I think, because so in my opinion, it just depends. It's not always that design should come first, but the technology itself. So
yeah, I mean, it's a popular sort of train of thought, and again, I think to some extent you need to think about, if you are entering an immature market and you have a function that's never existed before, people will prefer it to exist and it to be difficult to use and for it to not exist. So often the very, very first stages of a product are very engineering driven. Most often than not, the first hire in a startup will be a CTO. The CTO then knows all the digital problems. They'll understand, speed and efficiency and security. And so they'll hire another engineer, they'll hire another engineer, hire another engineer. And eventually you find that you have a tech-driven company. And there are lots of tech-driven companies out there, and they can be very successful. I'm sure you have a Nokia phone, brilliant tech-driven company. I have an Apple phone. I have an Apple phone because it's better designed. It is really, really well engineered, but it's a design, it's a design problem first and foremost. Again, in terms of your friends being frustrated by the engineering of Netflix, I mean, it's difficult to say. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know if they're frustrated by the particular API calls that have been set up, or they're not particularly happy with the particular form of JPEGing artifacts on the quality of the playback video. I mean, obviously, all of this stuff is a requirement. You need to be able to stream quickly. You need to be able to have a quality video. Start quickly, come down the streams quickly. You probably want to have good AI to kind of recommend the right movies to watch. But actually, even then, a lot of that has a customer experience perspective. A lot of the time, the designers are the ones who are talking to the engineers, saying, in our research, we've found that performance is really key, that people will not watch a stream if it doesn't start immediately. Sure, they will then go to the engineers and the engineers will make sure that things are buffering the background. But often it's the researchers that will say, come up with the insight to create the better customer experience. So I think these two are really, really difficult to detangle. I think it's really difficult to look at the current experience of Netflix and say, oh yeah, well, it's an engineering problem first and foremost. I think the 200-300 designers that work at Netflix would very much think that they are driving a large part of the value. But could you have Netflix without a really brilliant engineering stack? No, of course not. So again, I try and avoid these binary questions, because I don't think the question is, should we have engineering or design? I think the answer is, yes, we need a bit of both. Realistically, you probably need one designer for every 5 engineers. You need somebody to be making decisions to tell the engineers what to build. Who are making those decisions? Who is deciding how the sign-up flow works? Who is deciding what appears on the home screen of your brand new video streaming platform? Is the engineers doing that? Don't the engineers have better things to do with their time than making those decisions? Wouldn't it be better to have people who are skilled at making those decisions, because that's what they do every day, making those decisions? That's all I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting that you hire the right people for the job and hire the best people for the job, not hiring a bunch of people that aren't particularly good at that job because you've got them lying around.
Okay, thank you.
Great. And we've got Piotr.
Hi, Andy. Thanks for sharing all everything that you said today. Those are all very important thoughts. But I want to ask this more technical question right now. Technical in terms of how to put everything you said into a good use. You mentioned
a bit about your company.
Again?
A bit of background on your company.
Oh, okay. So Render is a cloud solution for filmmakers, graphic designers, and animators. This is a tool that
quite relevant, yeah.
Yeah. So our customers are creatives, are designers, but in a little different aspects than software design. So what we do is we are giving them powerful cloud workstations, secure cloud storage, and easy-to-use platform that allows them to deploy virtual machines and do their work in the cloud instead of in a traditional studio. So this is what we do. And the question I wanted to ask is directly connected to your answer to Dominic. So who are the right people, right? Who should tell those designers, those engineers, those five engineers who should set this direction? I'm answering this question because on the very beginning, me and my CTO were those product owners in our Scrum teams. We employed UX UI designers to help us with designing the system, designing the web page, designing the application, and we iterated a lot on the product till the moment that it started to bring the real traction. But right now I'm looking for someone that I would be able to place as a new product owner, or at least give this kind of direction. So on the very beginning, I thought that I'm gonna educate UX UI designer for this position, that I'm gonna promote him and share this kind of responsibilities. But I don't think that's with this experience that I have right now, I don't think it's a good way to do that. And so I'm really struggling with finding the right person for the job. So if you could share some thoughts about how would you approach the topic of creating the good designer team in a small company, in a small startup.
Well, I've got a glib answer that isn't very helpful, and then I've got a slightly more detailed answer. My glib answer is I'm really good friends with a guy called Michael B. Johnson. Michael B. Johnson was responsible for creating all of the tools that the Pixar animators use. He was their in-house head of design tools. Mm-hmm. I had the luck to go and visit him in Pixar, talk to his designers, talk to his design team, look at the tools he was making. The tools he was making 10 years ago were just out of this world. And what they were is he had gone and talked to his animators. He had gone and talked to his directors. He was invited into the rushes. He was an active part of the movie making process. Michael didn't see himself as a software developer. Michael sees himself as a movie maker, but he makes movies through the medium of the tools that he makes. And if he can remove as much friction as possible, if he can make the animators free up to express their minds, he's solved that problem. So I would hire him.
And this is exactly what I was doing, right? I've got more than 12 years of experience in the film industry, so I was naturally fitting this role. So it's but it's really hard to find the second me, right, here in Poland. And as you can probably imagine, that there are not a lot of people have a technical understanding and of being they were creatives on in some part of their life. So
yeah. So it's difficult. I mean, again, like I say, it was a glib answer, because the easy answer is you spend a ton of money to hire the best person possible that you know have solved this problem before. If you don't have a ton of money, you don't have the connections, or you don't know people, you can't get those people, because Michael left Pixar a couple of years ago. He's now working at Apple doing similar stuff. You know, you have to make do. However, the real answer is, first of all, I think we need to move away from this idea of kind of command and control, that some person is in charge and directs everybody. Actually, you know, this is also a glib answer, but it's teams that make products. And what you have is the person that sits in the middle of all those teams generally isn't necessarily directing people or telling them what to do. What you actually want is you want to hire the best people in their discipline. So you want to hire the best engineers, the best designers, the best product managers. You probably want to spend a bit of time working with them to set a vision. And if you've got a really strong vision about where the product is going to, then that means that you don't have to tell people what to do, because people understand the vision and are working towards it and can work independently. So having smart people who can work independently, and you work as a coach to help them grow rather than to direct them. I think the other thing is you have to sort of tell people what you do or what to do if you're not doing good research. If you're doing really good research, then the research will definitely help. Because what you'll do is you'll go out and you'll sit with, I'm friends with a company called Territory Design in London, who do a lot of the kind of the visual effects, not visual effects, visual effects for things like James Bond and kind of Blade Runner. You go and you spend a week with Territory, and you sit and you ask them questions and you watch how they work, and you ask them where their frustrations are, what are the things that you wish they could do better. And you come back and you replay that to your team. And then together you figure out, okay, well, these are the things, these are the features we need to put in our roadmap. And then you pull off the roadmap and you put it into the backlog, and then you ship it and you see how it works. And it becomes informed, particularly in your space where there's a very small number of people. You know, it's not like you're creating a social network where you have to, understand 8 billion people. You know, there might be 10,000 customers or 100,000 customers in your market. You can talk to a lot of them.
Actually.
Okay, 1 million. Okay. But
21 million.
21 million. Okay. But I imagine actually there's a bit of a pyramid. And I imagine you've got, the people like Territory at the top, and then you've got a lot of people kind of jobbing at the bottom. And you've got to decide where you market that.
And we are targeting the bottom, basically. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. So go and talk to those people and do research, understand what their needs, understand what their frustrations are, build a community, have really, really good community work going on, have a community manager that can kind of be that bridge between the community and you. And then basically feed all of this information in. Like, again, this is an interesting thing. Like, I think building a product is like solving a murder. You see these kind of like movies where basically you go into the room of the detective, and they'll have things stuck on the walls, and they'll have bits of string. It's messy, but so there's no clear kind of pipeline. What you have to do is you have to bring all this information in, you bathe in the information, and together you make decisions. Having a really strong researcher will help. Having a really kick-ass head of design will help. Having a really strong VP of product will help. Having a leadership team that have a vision will help. It's this combination of things that will all get there. It's not one keystone. And I think we're always looking for this man or great woman kind of idea of like, we just need to hire the one person, everything will be okay. Now, actually, we need to build an ecosystem, and we need to have the processes in place, and we need to, have you read the Pixar book, the Ed Catmull book?
No, not yet.
One of the best books for leadership out there. It's not just about movies, it's about how to be an amazing leader. So many of my friends that run startups have read the Creativity Inc. book. Read Creativity Inc. I think that will tell you everything you need to know.
Thanks for that. Thanks for sharing that.
Thanks a lot as well for asking your questions. And of course, Andy, please have a large glass of water when you finish this. Thank you. spending the time with us. I would like to wrap up with just a, final summarizing, let's say, question, and then we're already 3 minutes past the time. So thank you for spending a couple more minutes with us. So why do you consider design a competitive advantage? Why should teams and startups in particular take design as a competitive advantage when they're building their growth strategies and when they're actually thinking of how to differentiate themselves and how to find the product market fit and set on their path to growth?
Well, I think through some of the questions I've already answered, hopefully you've got a sense of where my thinking is, but to kind of summarize, I think unless you are building an AI machine learning driven product, technology is no longer a competitive advantage, it's a commodity. So if you can't rely on technological advantage, what else are you going to do? Well, maybe it's about the deals you've cut. Maybe your Netflix, and the reason people come to Netflix is you've got so much money, you've bought up all of the amazing content, and maybe you don't need to worry about that. And Netflix definitely have a content play. Maybe you were the first mover advantage, and because you got to the market first, you hoovered up all of these customers, and it's much harder to leave. Once people are in your ecosystem, it's much harder to leave. So there are lots of competitive advantages, but I think, we talked about this idea of the customer experience premium. We talked about the fact that, people are used to getting a high level of service. People are willing to pay more for a high level of service. This is why people pay, large amounts of money for a 5-star hotel and will pay a lot less for a 1-star hotel. We know that people pay for quality, pay for experience. And as I've sort of said as well, I think, I think design in its broadest sense, about solving problems, about understanding customers, about delivering the value to customers, is the engine that drives product. Now, like I say, you can choose to have a mediocre product and an amazing sales team. You can choose to have a really fast product, but is difficult to use and is frustrating to use. I think, considering how cheap design is, you'd be crazy not to. I mean, again, for me, I just hate leaving money on the table. If I see somebody that is leaving tons of money on the table because they're not doing relatively simple things, that feels like a waste, that feels inefficient, particularly if they're spending a ton of time and money on doing things that aren't working. The whole goal of a startup is to reach product market fit. Design is a big part of that. And I just don't think you can, in most of the current categories, I think it's really difficult to get product market fit unless you have a superior experience.
Fantastic. Let's all hope that at least the 42 teams here will go for that. And of course, it's in the startup mindset to do things better. So every piece of advice, especially from coming through the experience of other people, of yourself, and so this 1 hour and a half will just emphasize the fact that doing things better is the way to go. Thank you again. I don't want to keep you longer. 7 minutes passed already, so we really appreciate your time, having spent the last 1 hour and a half with us. We'll keep you in the loop with what's happening with the teams, and I think it's a huge thank you from all of us, from the Have to Web team, from the teams as well. So a round of applause and thanks again. We don't have
thank you.
but
Let's design a good bye-bye and thank you from the bottoms of our heart for Andy.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure chatting to you. If anybody wants to reach out and chat, you can just find me. I'm Andy Budd on Twitter. I do bits of coaching and advisory board work for startups. Also, obviously, I'm at Seedcamp at the moment. So if you are raising, do let us know. Or if I can just be of any help at all, reach out. If I can put you in touch with people or whatever, I'm here to help.
We'll meet Carlos on Friday. just to to warm up again their introduction to Seedcamp. So I think you're in the they'll be in another great company on Friday and onwards. So thank you again.
Excellent. Bye.
Thanks, Andy. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Lovely.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Afternoon with us. Bye.
And do you folks want me to stay on? You were talking about doing a little 15-minute interview. Is that still something you need to do, or because we've gone over, do you want to sort of pause that?
Well, I think parts of the questions that we had for you were addressed in the session. So I think that the questions that I don't want to particularly keep you longer. So we'll probably take Alex. What do you think? Should we maybe take 5 more minutes?
We didn't want to keep you longer than we already did, so not passing the time that we reserved in the schedule. If you have time for one question or two, we can do this again so that we have a separate piece. But if not, we can go back into what we've discussed in the last 1 or 2 questions and take out from there. Definitely we'll get back with the material when that's done. Like from the last 2 or 3 questions were quite getting to the touch base of what we wanted to ask you as well.
Brilliant. Well, look, if it's okay with you, I'm actually feeling a bit tired. You know, it's funny, but doing these talks online is always a little bit more kind of, tiring than in person. So if you feel you've got enough, please do just splice it together, and that would be great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, won't keep you longer. Thanks.
I think it's been great. It's been great, really good. So thank you very much.
Bless you. Thank you. Well, have a great rest of the event. Say hi to Carlos from me, and I'll hope to see you again in person sometime soon.
Yeah, same here. Some key questions, key details there. Yeah, in person, really good.
Okay. Cheerio then. Bye.
Enjoy. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Are you sure you want to stop recording to the cloud? Yes.
Yep.